10 on that grade.
Huh? Yeah, we got another one. Oh, it's 10.
That's 10.
It's 10.
All right. I love doing that.
You do it well.
The Audit Committee meeting of August 23rd, 2012 is called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law.
Yes.
And I'd like to recognize our new committee member, Miss Bernadetta. Is that how you pronounce it?
Bernetta.
Bernetta. That's a pretty way to have that name. Stevens?
Stevers.
And I was not, I didn't know your background, so you might just want to tell us a little bit.
Well, I'm a Las Vegas resident for 37 years. I went to UNLV here. I have 2 bachelor's degrees. I'm a certified public accountant. Worked in public accounting for about 5 years. Specialized in gaming and governmental audits. And for the last 18 years, I've been the director of finance for a local nonprofit out of school.
Very good. Always need that kind of accounting experience.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, we're now going to citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. I hear none, so we'll move on to item 4. Our business agenda. Can we have a motion for approval of the final minutes for the May 24th, 2012 Audit Committee meeting?
I
Are
would
there
so
any
move.
correction or additions, I should say?
I would so move without corrections.
All right, yes?
I was just indicating that unless you were here in the last meeting, Steve was staying on.
I kind of
Okay.
Okay.
Can we approve the 2 votes?
Can you have 4? There's a committee. Oh, okay, we'll need to maybe hold these minutes.
That's what I thought. So do we need a motion to hold?
We'll need a motion to hold, and you can vote on the whole motion.
All right. Do I hear a motion to hold this until we have the proper number of individuals present for the meeting?
I would make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we move to discussion for possible action on the appointment of a new chairperson and a vice chairperson for the remainder of calendar year 2012. The bylaws require the appointment of the chairperson and vice chairperson for the calendar year 2012. I will now entertain nominations for those offices.
Ladies first. If hearing none, I will make a motion that the current vice chairperson, Tarkanian, be the upcoming chairperson.
Well, that's very nice of you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. And how about the vice chairperson now?
I didn't want to do that to Councilman Ross, so I won't do that.
So then,
And I wouldn't feel good doing that to somebody that just barely came on as well.
it looks as if you're the one. I so move.
You would move, and
I
then
move. We've moved.
I'm sorry.
We've moved for him to be vice chair. All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? All right. That completes the election of the officers. Are there, well, we didn't have any questions or discussions on this. Let's have our general report from the city auditor, Mr. Radford Smalley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Currently, the following audits or projects are in process. A business licensing audit, which is focusing on the audit function, is being led by Brian Smith, and that's in the fieldwork stage. Durango Hills Golf Course Impress Fund is being led by Gary Phillips. That's also in the fieldwork stage. EUD NSP grant audit is by Nancy Beatty and is currently in the reporting stage. The Hanson contract review is by myself, and that's in the fieldwork stage. We have a cash audit, the Courts Witness Fund, That's being led by Gary Phillips. That's in the fieldwork stage. We have a software audit for fire and rescue by Philip Marmorowski, and that's in the fieldwork stage. And a software audit of the city clerk's office by Philip Marmorowski, and that's in the reporting stage. And this concludes my report.
Are there any questions or discussions on the report? Then we should have someone move for acceptance.
I move for acceptance.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we'll have discussion for the possible action plan on the fiscal year 2012-2013 annual audit plan, and have a report from Brad.
Thank you. The City Auditor's Office audits from an annual audit plan. The plan identifies performance audits selected for the year. We audit on a cyclical 5-year audit plan. The City of Las Vegas has 12 departments and 5 offices. We plan to audit each of the departments 4 times during that audit cycle, and each of the 2 offices twice. We plan to complete 10 department and 2 office audits during FY 2012-2013, which is our current fiscal year. By way of background, we will determine the objectives and scope of the audit by identifying the performance measures of the entity and selecting areas that present the greatest risk exposure. This plan allows for substitutions based on mayor and council or audit committee requests. The audit plan allows for computer assistance on audits, follow-ups, investigations, and other miscellaneous activities. By approving this plan, the City Auditor's Office will initiate these audits without having to return to the Audit Committee to obtain authorization. And that concludes my report on this issue.
All right. Are there any questions or discussions?
I have one question. It sounds to me like this is customary every year. Is there anything changed here from prior years?
This is a little bit different. One of the amount, the way it's presented to you is a little bit different. Before, we were much more specific on the particular auditable entities, but what we thought we would do moving forward is we would take the department, and then within that department we would focus on whichever area seemed to give us the most, we had the most risk exposure. And so when we say an audit, an audit of a department, well, the departments can be rather large, and so we're not talking about doing an audit of the entire department. We could probably spend, with our staff, we could probably spend the whole year on one. What we're looking at is, focused audits on issues that I think are high risk, and that's what so you're looking at it, it looks a little different than it did in years past. But basically we're doing pretty much the same thing. We're doing it on a cyclical basis, and we're going to eventually touch on everything that has high risk related to it.
Okay, that's all the questions.
Any other questions or discussion? And I'm ready for a motion.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, item number 8, report for possible action regarding an update of the audit of leisure services, Sport and Fields Administration, CAO 1603-101103.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This particular discussion and this update will be led by Nancy Beatty, and if you remember, this relates to an audit that was done back in 2011, and it has to do with municipal sports unit. There were some issues that were raised in that the committee asked us to give an update until all the recommendations had been implemented. And so that's what we're doing today. This is a little bit older than the other ones we're going to talk about, but it's a request by the committee to come back and revisit this issue until they're all completed.
Good morning, committee members. As requested, we are providing an update of the current status of implementation of audit recommendations for the audit of leisure services and sport field administration. To date, 5 audit recommendations have been implemented and closed. The remaining 15 audit recommendations are considered to be incomplete. It has been represented that a new computer application is being implemented to replace CLAS. Many of the recommendations listed on this slide do not have computer control issues associated with it that would prevent it from being implemented. This concludes my briefing. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time. Representatives of Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services are also here to
Ms. Beatty, my question would be the 15 recommendations incomplete. Is there a concern to you or our auditors about those incomplete? Are they in process in such a way that you're okay with this as it moves forward?
The general concern is there are a lot of management control issues that would make it very not as transparent and easy to manipulate. So they are in the process of implementing a computer application system that I think is represented as a lot better as far as computer control, and that would mitigate some of these concerns.
Of the 15, majority of them?
Probably about half of them.
Okay.
And that would be good to be able to have those checks and balances in place and the computer system that are not in place right now.
I've been the subject of audits over my life in the banking business a lot longer than they've been on the audit side. So my question would be, does anybody at Leisure Services have a response to anything, or have you dealt with them in such a way?
Mr. Workman, could I add one thing to this? We were concerned enough about this that we came back in the next year and we did an audit of that unit. And one of the recommendations in that, one of the findings that we had in that was we had $14,000 worth of funds that were not collected that should have been collected, which the recommendations that we have related to this should address that issue. And we did collect part of those, but and so it's real money on the table in many cases. With the improvement of the control environment, it would make it. Our concern was that there was really no assurance that everything was being collected. That's actually the first finding in that report. And subsequent to that, we've also had something similar happen that is currently being reviewed and looked into by the City Marshal's office. So we're very interested in seeing this these recommendations implemented. So I just thought I'd throw that in because that is part and parcel to possibly to the question that you asked.
Proper action for us is to keep this open and
well, I would recommend it. I would recommend not closing this until and continue to update and review this until they're all completed. I mean, when you look at this, well then there's, if you count the 4 that are in that second report and the 15 that are in this one, that's 19 incompletes, of which our report that we're going to issue on the follow-up, we have 37. So that's over half of the incompletes are tied up in this issue. So, yeah, I'd suggest we keep this one open.
Question?
I'm sorry, I think Steve Harson, who's the department director, may have said. I think you asked that question.
Yes, I did. I wanted to say if they had input to be given, we would certainly paint the picture for us better.
I just want to share, I'm Steve Harson, Director of Neighborhood Services. Again, we've been taking this audit very seriously. We've been working very closely with Brad and Nancy over the last several months. We are in the process and actually implemented phase 1 of a new rec track system, which is going to fix a lot of these things. Phase 2 is going to be occurring next month. So as we're testing and working out the bugs, and then they come in and test, I think you will see over time a lot more things being corrected. I did want to share with you, this is our tracking system, so I don't want to put it on to Brad or anybody else, but this one demonstrates how we are tracking our progress.
Thank you.
We like to color code. It makes it easier. But it sort of indicates each sheet of every finding, and as you will see here, while this is a finding that was provided by the auditor's office, these are things associated with it, that all these things must be done for the item to be complete. Lonnie, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
I think if I could, Lonnie Zimmerman, Deputy Director of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services. I think two things. One of the things that I want to make clear, and this is very important when Councilman Commissioner Wolfson was on the audit committee, is we don't, although not been tested yet because we need to be a reconciliation aspect of our computer software, our office no longer takes cash. All the finance is driven through the 6th floor. Now, audit will still have to turn something that's reconciled correctly and that we're still distributing the field in the right manner. But as far as our staff's ability, you had mentioned that 14,000, I was wondering if so many we collected had not been collected. That can't occur anymore. Or if it did, it would have to be completely illegal outside all of our bounds. So the cash is not taken within receipt of the 6th floor before we can issue a permit. The other is we have, like Nancy alluded, we think the computer software will provide those checks and balances, and additionally, we've also dealt with the staff in the office for redundancies and the separation of duties. So at a very high level, we're beginning to put the format, or we've been constantly putting the format in place. Once we get our policies out there, the computer software implemented, we're confident that we'll be able to close these items.
And you talk about the allocation policies that we have.
We've also, this is the first, obviously with 30 to 50,000 users at the end line on our fields, any adjustment we made to our policies is because we removed a lot of cheating. It's been a delicate balance on our sports field. This allocation, the one we just conducted in August, which will take place August through the January, February, is our new policy, and that's one of the things that Nancy and the group's waiting to see too, is if we administered that correctly, if we were equitable in our distribution, and if we followed our own policy. One of the things that kind of slows that down is we can tell that we've done it, and we can demonstrate that we've done it, but there has to be the reconciliation, and we're right in the process of implementing the new software. So I don't want to speak for Ed and his group, but there's a little bit of a lag because they're certainly not going to take us at our word without any backup. But it's in the system, and we need to adjust and get all the information in the system.
This has been a very complicated issue. Do you have any questions?
Well, I just had a question about training, because I'm new to this, but it's obviously been in the works a long time, and the computer programs take a long time to get up and get running and have glitches. What would you expect? Some of these items are not related to your computer system, correct? Do you have an idea of the sense of when you would be able to think the ones that aren't related versus the ones that are, and when do you expect all of them would you think would be reasonable?
Let me answer it in two parts. One is your sheet will show our anticipated outlines of when we will complete on something specific, but at a very general level, this is all a part of our, and we're not doing this because it's part of our evaluation, but we've tied it into our evaluation, one, to establish the sincerity of our efforts in this, and two, is that it has been a long process, and even a difficult process, once we can come out there, everybody be better off. So Steve has explained to me, but it will be completed this fiscal year. So, and it is our true intention and our goal. We think that once we move into the holiday season, we will have the background of both the computer system and our ability to request testing by the auditor's office. I think that we can begin this fall, but it's our goal to be able to sit here in front of you prior to July 1 of next year and have these items.
How close is the computer system? This is during fall of 2012. Are you on target for the computer system?
Phase 1's been implemented. Our phase 2, in fact, meetings are going on right now in the sports because it's so distinctly different than the rest of our operations. It's going to occur September and October. We believe once that's in place, we can ask for testing from the auditor. One thing we've tried to be sensitive to is that we want to have it right. We don't want to continually ask Nancy and her group to come back and for us to fail because we're trying to rush this.
Chairwoman, if I may, Director Harson would touch on basically a unit that he created that actually goes through and researches and makes sure that they're following the processes and also just reviewing their internal operations and process that was created about
A year and a half.
year and a half ago. So if you want to touch on that.
And yeah, when we blended neighborhood services with Felicia, we created a unit that is known as processes, systems, and audits. And what they do is they're helping with all the technology, getting us up into the 21st century. They are also, while they've been very integral in the MSU, helping us with other audits, either outstanding or even past ones. So anything to improve systems throughout the entire enterprise, big focus on MSU, has been in place so that we never get this out of whack in the future.
So I guess the lesson here is we did take this serious, and they have implemented internal processes, and that will hopefully prevent this from ever occurring in the future.
Can I just make a point?
My boss.
Yeah, I want to jump in here. I'm Scott Adams. I'm the city's chief urban redevelopment officer. And I'm over in the manager's office, the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services Department. I've been very engaged in this as well. I wanted you to understand. I recently convened a meeting of the auditor and the Parks and Rec staff, and we went through every one of these one by one to see exactly where we stood and what we've got left to do. And I believe if you look at the sheet that they put together, there are still there's findings, and then each of the findings break into little sub-findings. There's individual components of each one. Of the items that are still open, there's about 28. Of those 28, we believe 11 of those can be cleared Monday. If the auditor were to come down and examine their files and look at their processes and procedures, they would clear right now. And I'll give you an example of one, which is not really tied to the allocation process. We could do this tomorrow and we'd get a clearance. It's just a matter of whether the auditor would do that or not. You go to number 13. I'm just using this as an example. Our leagues and teams have to provide documentation that they're a bona fide not-for-profit in order to enjoy certain status.
Page 13.
13.
It's a very simple matter of examining our files to determine whether or not we received, reviewed, and have in the file proper documentation of non-for-profit
Let's make
status.
sure we're on the right page.
Yeah, 13.
Okay.
I'm sorry, item number 13 on page 13.
Okay, then.
And I'm only using this as an example. That really is not tied to the allocation process. We could do it tomorrow and get a clearance on it. They're ready. Because I've made sure they're ready. And I just wanted to point that out. I believe we are much further along than what it shows in the presentation on paper based on where I believe they are item by item at this point in time. And I want you to understand that. I want you to know that from the manager's office perspective, we are writing this and are very much on top of it because we'd like to see it cleared out as well.
Okay. Let me make a comment about 13.1. And we did meet several times.
Yes.
This was one of the issues. There was, I think it was four recommendations that we came down with that we thought we were going to try to clear. We've been trying to work with the department very closely, and that was one of them. And although I actually sent a response back to that one, and basically it says, this can't be closed until the implementation of the new allocation process. To date, we have not received any approved documentation to demonstrate that the new allocation process is in place. Additionally, we need a copy of your approved policies and procedures relating to the new allocation process prior to testing. Previously submitted documentation relating to this is from a different period. So we couldn't clear this one because we need to, in order to really test it, we're going to have to see it, how it's in the, that's why this one is in the category that Nancy put it in, which is in one that's tied to the new allocation process. Until we can see what the allocation process says, and then we can go out and test it against what's happened, we really can't clear this. This was why we left this one in this particular situation. So we'll work with anybody that we'll work with whoever city management wants to, work on this. We're going to work with it. We've done this. We did this several times related to this particular one.
Yeah, I guess we have a difference of opinion on this, in that I don't believe it ties to the allocation process. Either team is or a league is not for profit or not. There should be a procedure for identifying that and documentation that follow that. And it's a real easy matter of looking at the files to determine whether or not they are. And this is an example of, I think, a lot of these that are ready to go, ready to clear, And I think our staff has done the kind of staff work necessary to get that clearance. And I think again, to reiterate my point, is I think we're much further along in being in a position to clear than it looks on surface.
Madam Chair, if I may, please, we've been working with RAD. We had a total of about 66 that were outstanding, and they worked really well with us in closing a majority of the ones that we were doing. And I give RAD and his staff a lot of credit because they could play hardball and play a typical auditor and not work with us. But they have been very amenable to coming with us and working with us and going through this process. There's probably some still nuances that we have to work out, but overall we have a great working relationship. We respect what he has to do and help us make us more effective and more in compliance with the audits. That said, I just want to recognize that we do have a great working relationship with the city auditor and their staff.
Well, really what happened is over a period of years, these problems developed. Over a long period of years.
Right.
And there were a lot of them. And you have been chipping away at them. And we have to do it the auditor's way because we're at that point now. We're on the auditor's level. So that's the one who controls the next move we make for approval. But we do know you have been chipping away at it. It's just that we ended up in a situation we wish we didn't have. I know all of us wish we hadn't had. And in order to do it and do it well and to meet the audit's recommendations, we have to follow that very carefully.
Councilman, could I make a couple comments regarding whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit? There's actually two ways that they could be profit or not-for-profit. One is related to the federal and the other is related to the state. So those are issues that have to be addressed in that policy, which we don't have. Then, in order to really test it, we have to have an allocation process that went through that and designated them as either profit or not-for-profit. And at this point, we don't have that because the allocation process has not taken place. So that's why we didn't clear that one. Now, I will say we really have. Let me just by way of background. When we complete a report and the auditee selects a management plan of action and gives us a timetable or a date when that should be done, then we go away because we do not have the power to tell them to do it. All we have the power to do is go out and see that it's done. And in order to be a catalyst for change, well, then that's what we try to do. But we're actually waiting for the department to tell us that what we ask them to do is we ask them to let us know when you have it complete and give us all the documentation that you can send to us or reference the documentation so we can go someplace and find it so that we can review it before we come out. And what we do is we do almost like a mini audit to make sure that the changes actually did accomplish what we wanted to. And then once that happens, well, then that's when we issue the letter that says it's moved from incomplete to complete. So
what is holding this up? And you're saying that you have it completed, is that right?
Yeah,
But did you send that report to him that he needs?
Well, I think it's just a matter of looking at our files. Here's the interesting thing. We have teams and leagues using fields and facilities now. They're either not-for-profit or they're not. We understand that as we allocate in the next round to teams and leagues, we need to verify compliance with them either being or not being not-for-profit. But we can show today in our files that the teams that have been allocated using the fields have gone through appropriate determination of that status.
And he's saying, however, that it isn't good enough to have it in your files. You need to give a final report to him. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're talking about the appropriate determination. That's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for the policy. We're waiting for the procedure so that we'll know what the proper determination is.
So
and we're not there
policy
yet.
and procedure.
We're in the process of doing it. But you're in the process of doing it, but you're not there
So
yet.
is there no
The
policy?
policies and procedures that we have in our files still say leisure services on them. So, and you haven't been leisure services for at least a year and a half. And so, have there been any changes since that occurred a year and a half ago that I would need to see so I can actually tell? I mean, that's what it comes down to, is because I have to look at what the policies are, and that's what drives how I test. And unless I have those policies in place, current ones that have been approved, I can't do anything.
Well, she asked a very good question, didn't she? Because it gets us to the point, because I could see where, and I wonder sometimes too why it's taking so long. I think it's very important, if the government came in here and audited, they wouldn't say, I'll look into it. They'll say, give me the information first. You have to give them the proof of whatever, so that's why you need that.
That's why we need that. So it gives us the
So,
criteria to test
if you
against.
got it done, would you get it into the report form that they need in auditing, and then we can cross it off?
So the question now becomes, Madam Chair, that do we have a policy in process?
If I could again, line for the record, I thought that I had sent over to Nancy with a group of others our policy specific to that one. If she doesn't have it, it's entirely my fault, and we will forward that to her. And it could be a matter, I apologize, because sometimes I see the audit of leisure services is how this is titled today. It very well could be I sent her an old format that said leisure services within the policy. It's just one of the many challenges when we audited one department to become a new department. But I thought I had sent it. If I hadn't, it is entirely my responsibility, and we will forward that to her again.
Okay, so your understanding is you've tied it to a policy that does exist, and when looked at in that format, it would be clear based on that, and that's our assumption.
That's right.
And the policies that were submitted in July of this year all said leisure services on them.
Just make a change, we may have a policy, is what you're saying.
And they were the same ones I got.
Okay, that's the point we can do. I think that's going to be easy
I know
for
we're
you.
going to have all this stuff back off. It's my commitment to you.
Councilwoman Tarkanian, one thing I'd say, if I may, is I appreciate Mr. Adams' statements. I think if we're that close on some of these, hopefully by the time we have, in the next meeting, in the November meeting, we'll be reviewing the annual follow-up. And as I said, there's like 19 of the recommendations are tied to this. So hopefully a large number of that 19 will be completed before we get to that meeting in November, which we'll make ourselves available. When we have the information, we can go out and perform our due diligence. We'll be glad to do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or discussions on this? Should we have a motion to accept the report? Would we have a motion on that, please?
Yes, I move that we accept the report.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We now move to discussion for possible action on the petty cash account, the city clerk's office. A report from Ralph.
Thank you. Gary Phillips was the lead auditor on this audit, and we'll give a report.
Morning, subcommittee chairs. Okay, the objective of this report was to determine if management controls were adequate, ensure that expenditures are properly authorized and reported, determine that policies and procedures were followed, and to review the overall petty cash operations to determine how tasks were accomplished. We had 4 findings in the area: petty cash fund verification, petty cash fund reimbursement, required memos, and petty cash fund reconciliation. In verification, the petty cash log was not maintained. Under reimbursement, fund needed to be reimbursed at least monthly. Memo, when disbursements were not made, a memo was required to be signed by the department director. And reconciliation, this must be done periodically, but there's no indications that any were accomplished. Management response to this: the city clerk's office director has chosen to dissolve the petty cash funds. The funds were returned to treasurer on March 26, 2012.
Any questions or discussion on this? That's one way of solving the problem. Well, too bad we can't do that with a lot of our petty cash.
We very rarely use the petty cash, and that's probably why a lot of reconciliation places we never used it. So when we took a look at how often it was used, it wasn't worth we just said dissolve that.
Would you like to read?
Oh, and just Fairfield Bridges City Clerk.
What was that?
I'm not used to doing that.
Oh, that's
I have to
right.
say her name for
You have to
her.
say her name. Good. Okay, do we have a motion?
Yes. I'll make a motion to accept.
The motion has been made to accept. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then we accept the report. Discussion now goes to possible action on audit of parks, recreation, and neighborhood services, outside employment, and cell phone issues. And Brad has a nice report here.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Gary Phillips was the lead on this audit, and will give a report.
Okay, good morning again. Outside employment, we noticed a potential conflict of interest when the city employee was paid as a city vendor. So we reviewed local business licenses and found several listed for this particular employee. Also reviewed outside employment forms that are required to see if they were in place. And looking at these, we noticed that at least one business was closely related to the person's duties, and one included cell phone, the business that he was involved in. On the cell phone use, we took a look at the records from September 30th of 2007 to January 28, 2011, and there was 5,904 cell phone calls totaling 15,976 minutes. Not one of these cell phone calls were reimbursed by the employee to the city, as they were all identified as city business related. It was obvious that management was not monitoring the city's issued cell phone billing. We made recommendations in this audit of 4. The first was to remind all employees that outside employment forms must be approved by the Department and Human Resources. Also said that the department should update the work rules to include the employee-vendor relationship policy. Also, as management needs to follow the city's policy required review of all cell phone records, and management needs to remind all employees that all personal cell phone calls must be reimbursed to the city. Management response, they agreed to all 4 of the recommendations, and the date of completion is scheduled to be September 30th, 2012. Any questions?
Any questions or discussions? I had a question now. This is for over a period of about 4 years.
Yes, ma'am.
And what would the personal calls be? What would they, I mean, really there's not much use for any personal calls while you're at work, right?
This
I mean,
particular...
what's the average that you would expect if you're doing it right?
If you're doing it right, I'll take myself as an example. I have a city cell phone, and I have personal calls on there to come in. Normally, they come in to me because the person needs to reach me. I'd say probably maybe 10 calls a month.
10 calls a month.
And we have a reimbursement rate of 15 cents a minute. And every month, it's put on the website. You, as a city cell phone holder, go to that website. You check the calls that are, all your calls are listed. You check the calls that you consider personal, and they take it out of your paycheck. And if you don't pay it on time, you get an automatic email, comes directly to you, say, hey, look at your cell phone records and annotate them whether they were personal or not. And if they were all personal, then you pay it. If they were all city-related business, then you would annotate that, and it'd go back to the management on that. But this particular employee had a different type of job where he was sending homeless to different parts of the country, and he had to make a contact with an individual to see whether or not they would be able to receive that person back or verified. So it was very difficult to tell whether or not the calls were personal or business related. So that's why it was really important for the city management to get in there to review the calls and to have a discussion with the employee of determining whether or not the calls were personal or city related.
So we don't know if they were personal.
Oh, no, not at all. It's self-identifying. Like I get my record in, okay, I got 25 calls, 15 are, personal, and the other are city related. I'm identifying the ones that are personal for reimbursement.
Did the person admit any were personal?
None.
It turned out
Madam
none.
Chairwoman, we actually interviewed him, Gary and I did, and we asked him specifically, we had the list of cell phone calls, and we asked him specifically if any of those were personal, and he said, no, they're not. So it's a self-reporting situation, and if someone was going to challenge him on that, would have to be somebody who really knew his work routine and his workload, and would have to be able to say, being a supervisor probably, would say that this is out of reason. I know you couldn't have done this, or I challenge you because I think this is not all, that there are some personal calls in here. That wasn't a situation that Mr. Phillips and I could possibly be in. And as Mr. Phillips said in his report, in this particular case, well, then that challenge didn't happen. The review didn't happen, and the challenge didn't happen. So that's why we made the recommendation.
So the recommendation is made because in the future it might not be legitimate?
Yes.
And that you just feel that the monitoring needs to come from within the department, supervisors within the department?
Yes.
Because they're the only ones who would have the knowledge to know if it were legitimate.
The situation with cell phones has kind of evolved over the years, and it kind of got to the point where I think that maybe, although the reports are available, you have to request the reports in order to get a copy of them. The department has to. And sometimes it's not exactly a hot-button issue, and so it just wasn't being done. So that's why we made the recommendation that they reinstitute that practice.
Any other questions or?
Well, it looks as though management's agreed on all of these, and you're about a month away from them getting it fixed. So I have no questions. We would move for approval.
Can I make one other comment, which you didn't ask the question, but let me let Mr. Phillips tell you if this employee still works for the city of Las Vegas.
No, he doesn't.
It's given the opportunity.
When you did this, was this on just this one employee? I just wanted to say that in the work that we do with parks and recreation and people who are there, I get comments, particularly from 2 or 3 park areas, that the workers come and they sit in their car and they're, well, sleeping or on the phone. And, I just wondered if you check that. You might want to sometime for those who are working in the parks. Or else, this will cover that too, though, won't it? This will take care of the supervisors. They're monitoring them more closely. Is that correct? I don't have anybody responding to that. I don't know if, you know what I'm trying to get at. This has been a recurrent problem that we have, and are we monitoring phones more closely also for those who are working in the parks?
Well,
Or do they have a cell phone?
I'm sure the parks would be under a different department, but in regards to our department, this employee was a caseworker that was working for
I
home
see.
services.
I see.
And once the city went to a self-reporting, self-certifying the calls, as Brad indicated, we did not receive those reports. But our department, we do put out information to make sure that individuals are monitoring. In this particular circumstance, because of the nature of the calls the employee had to make, it was very hard to distinguish whether or not they were business or personal. I do agree that they were excessive and 15,000 calls, but it was just difficult to determine. This investigation was only on one person, and I don't think was systemic within the department.
And Chairwoman, if I may address, I'm over operations maintenance that takes care of all parks. And they do have logs of all the individuals that go out there and monitor it. I think due to the attrition that happened over the last 4 years, individuals sleeping in trucks and et cetera, the public perception, I don't think it's actually warranted. They do get breaks for state, federal laws, and they honor those things. We have a very strong manager, Daphne LaGarza, and she keeps an eye on them. And of course, there's always room for improvement. but we do monitor all phone calls and also monitor the parks. We have very good supervisors, staff, and I think we're fine-tuning them as we speak today. So it's a continuous improvement.
So that's already handled.
I sure hope so.
So I'm not going to go find anybody not on a break using a phone. Okay. Could I have
I did, yes.
and did we
Move
vote
for
on?
approval, yes.
A move for approval, all in favor?
Aye.
And thank you for the comment. All right, the motion passes. Now we are going to discuss possible action on audit of building and safety, code enforcement, property nuisance abatement program. I know Chris is, you guys are going to have lots of good stuff.
Madam
Mr.
Chairperson, the Brian Smith was the lead auditor on this particular project, and he will give his report.
Great, thank you. First of all, I'd like to recognize Chris Knight, Director of Building and Safety, and Mike Baus, who's the manager over the code enforcement. I'd like to start off by saying how much I appreciate the support I received from both of these individuals in completing this audit. From the very get-go, they were on board with helping me out in any way to complete this audit. Code enforcement is a division within the Department of Building and Safety, and code enforcement enforces nuisance zoning, building and housing code violations on private property in accordance with the municipal code. Examples of these violations include waste, litter, polluted pools, high vegetation, inoperable and junk vehicles, and vacant or dangerous buildings. Code enforcement officers respond to complaints received from citizens and, where appropriate, issue violation correction notices. Subsequent re-inspections are completed and additional violation correction notices are issued as necessary. As part of this audit, I had a chance to do a couple of ride-alongs with some code enforcement officers and get a little glimpse into their world, and it was very interesting. In fact, I had the chance to see an individual that was a known hoarder, and sometimes we don't think things like that exist, but it was fascinating to see some of the things that they confront on a daily basis. Various fees and penalties are recorded until the violation is corrected. If a violation is not corrected by the second re-inspection, code enforcement typically begins the property nuisance abatement process. And code enforcement requests bids from a list of contractors to complete the nuisance abatement, and then awards the project to the lowest bidder. Following the abatement, the case is presented at a public hearing to the City Council for consideration of the expenses. The City Council typically utilizes property liens to recover abatement costs incurred by the city. Code enforcement reports the liens at the Clark County Recorder's Office. During 2011, code enforcement closed approximately 11,800 municipal code violation cases. So that gives you a little glimpse into the significance of their work and their caseload. Through code enforcement's work, most violations are corrected by the property owners, and a small percentage of these inspections lead to code enforcement having to proceed with property nuisance abatements. Code enforcement oversaw 64 property nuisance abatements in 2011. And while this is a small percentage of the total cases that code enforcement deals with, it is a very, well, considering these cases go before council and what's the word I'm looking for? Well, considering that they are brought before council, it's very important that certain controls are in place and that the proper internal controls are in place. So these photos give you a little glimpse into code enforcement world. Amazing, some of the things that happen out there. Our audit objectives focus on evaluating the calculation of fees, penalties, and costs, the contractor bid process, the eligibility of contractors to perform abatements, the recording of documents, property owner notifications, and document retention. Now I'd like to give you just a quick overview of some of our audit findings. We identified inconsistencies in the methodology being followed for the calculation of daily civil penalties. The end date used in the calculation varied between cases reviewed. In addition, abatement cases were identified where failed inspection civil penalties were included in the calculation, and other cases where they were excluded.
We also found that verbiage on the calculation of daily civil penalties on key documents was confusing and subject to different interpretations on when the daily civil penalty should begin, 10 days versus 11 days after the issuance of the notice and order. In addition, the abatement date included on key documents did not always agree with the abatement completion date identified by the contractor on an affidavit of completion or the work completion date noted on the contractor's invoice. We also looked at the bid and award process, and as previously noted, code enforcement uses outside contractors to perform property nuisance abatements. Code enforcement maintains a list of contractors who are invited to bid on the abatement projects, and the project is awarded to the lowest bidder. During 2011, approximately 91% of the property nuisance abatements were performed by only 4 contractors. We identified the following deficiencies in the bid and award process during our audit. We found a lack of a documented process outlining how contractors are to be added and removed from the authorized contractor listing, a lack of a formal solicitation process for periodically adding interested contractors to the listing, a lack of a formal process for evaluating and documenting the performance of contractors. We also found inadequate documentation on how staff should appropriately review and process the submitted bid package. We found inadequate monitoring of the status of the city and state licenses of contractors used for the abatement projects. In fact, we found one contractor that completed 8 abatements subsequent to their city business license expiring. We also found 2 contractors on the authorized contractor listing whose state contractor license had been revoked or suspended. These contractors had not been awarded any abatement contracts during 2011. We also found inadequate monitoring of the adequacy of the insurance coverage of contractors as evidenced by differences in coverage types and amounts between the certificates of insurance submitted by the contractors. And code enforcement hasn't adequately documented what is considered sufficient insurance coverage amounts. Also, in reviewing the process being followed to take documents to be reported to the Clark County Recorder's Office, we found opportunities for reduced risk of loss and improved efficiencies by eliminating the use of cash to pay the county for the recordings and obtaining recorded documents at a later time rather than having the staff wait for the recordings to be completed. We also identified the need for improved documentation, outlining which specific documents should be retained in hard copy and electronic copy form to ensure compliance with the city's document retention standards. As I mentioned before, management was very supportive of this audit. They provided action plans for each one of the recommendations, and those action plans and their estimated dates of completion are found at the back of the report. And the estimated dates of completion range from November 2012 to May 2013. And my contact with them over the last few months, they've already taken some significant measures to address these recommendations. I'd now be glad to answer any questions you might have. And of course, we didn't have
any questions or discussions?
I get, if I may, Madam Chair, looks to me like this was a problem that you had a little bit of a few years ago, and all of a sudden it became massive over the course of a couple of 3 years, just massive, the number. Is that perceptive?
Chris Knight, Director of Building and Safety. I can't really attest to that. Building and Safety's been under me for about 1.5 years as a part of the city's reorganization. I can tell you that intuitively going into management of code enforcement that I had been told a number of things needed to be rectified. And I think that, if I remember correctly, we asked for the audit. And we are very interested in being able to delve deep into our process. I think that there's been a culture of, well, that's the way we've always done it, and it's been kind of verbal and nothing in writing. I don't know that it became massive, but I think there was a general feeling citywide that something needed to be improved in code enforcement. And Brian is right. We're very supportive of the audit. I may be a strange duck. I don't know. I like audits. I like receiving audits because what this audit has done is told me what I had in mind and what I was seeing intuitively this now has brought it to light and given me factual backup to hold my manager, Mike Bouse, who's only been with us since October of last year. And Mike sees things from a management standpoint very much the way that I do, and he agrees with these audit findings. Mike and I will be meeting once a month to track the progress on these audit findings, because we fully intend to comply with the calendar that we've given. But I don't know how massive it was, but I think there was some uneasiness on the part of city management and certainly uneasiness on my part that over time some of these processes had gotten loose. It's like anything, as it ages, it loosens up, and sometimes it needs to be retightened, and I think that's the process that we're in right now.
Thank you.
I can just mention, Mr. Bowles, he came on board in the middle of this audit, and I think part of these findings relate to some changes in management. There was an acting manager for a period of time. There was, as is mentioned in the report, there's a lack of, formal documentation of procedures. And so, of course, the lack of those procedures can lead to inconsistencies in how things are being done. And when you mentioned that it's become massive, are you referring to like the number of complaints from the public?
I'm speaking of and I've watched this on the. Why in the world would anybody tune in to see the photograph? Occasionally, it's my duty here.
To the city council meetings?
I try to get to sleep at night.
You're not excited enough?
And what I've noted, and I've been a lender for 30-some-odd years before my current situation, and what I've noted is the massive number of people who just leave the house and they're gone. And of course, then city staff gets noted. My desire always is to make sure immediately that if they're gone, that the ultimate lender be told immediately, because a lot of them will rectify before it goes to the picture set up. That was my one concern. And I noted that there are many, many houses, and people are talking about the fact that, we're about done with that. We're not at all. There's so many houses. And I was just concerned, and it's not in here as a finding that isn't occurring. So maybe you're really good at the moment no one's there at all, that contact is made, immediately get that lender, let them rectify. Most lenders will immediately rectify, but obviously they have the law that they have to abide by about, payments being missed, et cetera. So that was kind of what I was referring to. It would seem like a massive undertaking.
I can respond to that. You're not mixing an apple and an orange, but you're mixing one type of pear with another type of pear, and they're both very strongly related. The city adopted a property registration bill to deal with the foreclosure issue. What you're referring to is this massive foreclosure issue and the number of houses that have gone vacant and that are not being maintained. And in order to address that, the city council wisely asked for, and we put together a property maintenance, property registration bill that when a bank forecloses on a piece of property, that they have to register with the city of Las Vegas if it's vacant. And they also have to hire a maintenance firm. A lot of the banks were already doing that. Some of them were not. We were getting an increase in the number of complaints about vacant homes because of the foreclosure issue. But once we adopted this property maintenance bill, or property registration bill, we have gotten very good compliance with the banks that are participating with us. The thing that it did the most for us is it gave us a contact person that we could contact when we got a complaint about a vacant house that had been foreclosed on. We have found great responsiveness on the part of the banks that have registered and do have a maintenance property. We do not have to do abatements on them. We call them, they go out, they fix it. And so that's one aspect of it, but the foreclosure market impacts us, but the massive foreclosures it funnels down to just those homes that are vacant, because there's a lot of foreclosures where people are still living in.
Correct.
And but that has helped. The other thing is we had a huge backlog when code enforcement came over to building and safety, and Mike just reminded me of this. of abatements that were not getting to council. We were taking as much as 14 months to do an abatement, to do a notice of violation, do the abatement, and get it on the council agenda for leaning on the property. We cut that from 14 months down to, I think it was 3 months, and Mike is cutting it even further. And I think that's one of the things that caused us to welcome the audit is, what is it in our processes that's so messed up that we can fix and streamline? And the audit's identified a number of things, and we've done some things. We did a policy on the 6.1 and 6.2 where it says develop and implement policy to verify licenses. Brian mentioned that we had one contractor complete 4 jobs and his license had expired. Well, we don't ever want that to happen. And so we have a policy now. We check the state license annually and we check the city license regularly. So we're making corrections to make this better, to make our documentation better, and to make this process better, because we deal with some pretty sensitive things. When we tear somebody's house down, we better have things right. And I think this audit is very welcome, and these things will help us move in the direction that we want to have better documentation, better written policies. Mike has formed a committee of the staff, and they're just a few weeks away from having a new set of written policies on how we approach our business and code enforcement. So we welcome the audit, we welcome the findings, and we look forward to completing these things and improving our process.
Thank you.
I would like to say you certainly have improved it a lot, and since you've been working in these areas, we've had the areas where you need to tear down the house, or you need to do something like that, and I know you've tried to do it always fairly, and you report regularly in written form as to what's happening, and that's a very important thing for a council person to have. So I really have appreciated that myself. And I think one reason why, sometimes when you start to look for things and improve them, then you find all these other little things that needed improving, and that might be why you see that rush there. But I believe the council members feel very strongly that we have made great progress. It's just that you had a lot to do. That's it. Any other questions or discussion? Nothing? Okay. Then we have our citizen participation.
Have a report?
Oh, excuse me. Do we need to make a vote on this too? Sorry. Okay. Who wants to move that we accept the report? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes and the report is accepted. And now we move on to citizens participation. All right. Are there any citizens here? Just the employed ones leaving the room? All right. Then I will say that the audit meeting is adjourned.
Well done, Dr. Well done.
Well,